that far out.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So we're able to do something today that was unexpected. So we read that school board contract. So we had to read it, reread it, and read it again. And I was looking for a way out to be able to use.
We've already seen that.
Maybe I've got my glasses in my pocket. Whatever it's called. Can you just use
You need farmer glasses?
It's pretty small.
I know, it is real small.
I can get it up here maybe.
I
got my flashlight.
Trying to cut down on using paper, we're trying to save. Put it all in one sheet.
So print front and back.
Mark, I got a real magnifying glass now. I went and bought one after that day. If you want it.
I'll be all right, maybe.
So
I'm sort of like, no, I can't hear, I
read. That's what it said. You don't read it that way. That's the way I need to read it. Yes, but I want my
That name changes.
I'm about to get those on me on that.
He's only slept on one.
Let
me fix This all happened like 12 months.
Yeah.
Because I made it delivered. I wouldn't.
Yes.
Just ask permission to approach.
Oh, do I? Oh, gosh. Someone told me that.
He has to hold up the scepter, otherwise.
Okay.
Don't feel it.
Counselor.
Howdy.
Wave your green flag, boogie, boogie.
All right.
Start. Here we go.
And lay one on there.
Yes, sir, Commissioner, how you doing?
Don't hate me.
Derek?
He knows we talked about it yesterday.
He just said he's been running a few minutes behind.
We got Mike's traffic.
Yeah, they got several construction projects they decided to do with rush hour. Yes. Getting off the golf course. Whoops.
Where golf shirt? Sort of kind of says something.
Where the golf shirt? Where you been? No.
For the record, all of these are Anthony's.
Didn't give you the whole stack up?
He did give me every shirt.
Yeah.
He said, they ain't no need to make them twice.
Well, there you go. That way, then. He wasn't going around the world.
I told him, I never knew he had flip flops to match, or sorry, Crocs to match.
They do, we're doing
Purchased it or?
How's your day, Mr. Sir?
How about yours?
I'm gonna agree with you.
Yeah, I've had worse.
Ours was very good. Come off a night like last night, it's hard not to have a good morning.
Yeah. Yeah, I told Frank I'll keep coming back.
Long time coming to be able to do stuff like that.
Yeah, it's good.
That's okay.
I usually
If y'all are wondering, we're just waiting on Derek. Just so y'all know. Not for Derek, for minutes.
I think we were waiting to see who's gonna start first.
That's the story of Rhonda's life, waiting on Derek. Rhonda's life, waiting on Derek.
Waiting on there.
You can really do it. We kind of not really lost touch. Has and sort of separated. We got 2 or 3 years. He's got to get the court. This kind of thing. So he said that dialysis and some sort of calcium condition.
Okay.
He had some medications.
We haven't, they have.
How was school today, sir?
And he told him. So it goes, that's what he.
Yeah, this is brought up.
Go back to the.
We're all in.
Yeah, one of them.
It's your third grade.
What are you gonna do? Okay, but there's.
I heard you.
Trisha Adams.
Gentlemen,
Her mother, sister, served her son.
good to see you.
Commissioners, she was
Yeah.
involved with it.
No. I understand. So, we'll get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Madison County Board of Commissioners Special Call Meeting. It is, September 26th, 5:30 PM, 5:35 PM. We're here to discuss, the transitioning of the Water Department operations for Industrial Development and Building Authority to the Board of Commissioners. I don't know if me and Christina is back and forth this about all day, and we have a scenario that may help. I don't know. I'm really trying to figure out what point to start at, to be honest. We've discussed the financials, we've discussed the operations, we've discussed retirements, we've discussed the financials. And to be honest, I think it would be better if, maybe Christine, if you want to give us a caption of what your thoughts on this was today, because I felt like we were exactly on the same page, and then we can go from there with the questions. Or would you rather just start off with?
Yeah.
I know the IDBA has a lot of questions for the Board of Commissioners.
Yeah.
That's more or less what we're trying to do.
I can start off with, we're all here because the Board of Commissioners put together a study committee to evaluate several things in the county and how those things are operated. It come as a suggestion from that study committee to separate the industrial, the IDBA and the water department, so the IDBA can focus on economic development. That was more of their role and what we thought that they were originally created for. So that executive summary is in all of your packets. The water department and the IDA department budgets separated are in your packets. The IGAs and all those amendments between the county and the IDBAs in your packet. The water systems policy is also in there, and then we're going to, at the end of the conversation, we'll talk about food-grade meal. Todd and I discussed, I know there's been a lot of conversations we've had with some of the staff of the water department, some of the members of the IDA board on daily operations. We feel as if it would be best for, there's been discussion around assets of vehicles, equipment, tools would just stay, all transition to the Board of Commissioners. The water department would stay in the building that they're in, the staff would stay in the place that they're in. Rodney Schubert is currently the water superintendent, so under the BOC structure, that would fall as a department head, so he'd do the same thing as kind of like Alan Ledzinski's position. So we would just run all their operations. They would just report to Todd, which I guess that's similar to how they do now for being with some of their water.
Right, in the absence of executive director.
Yeah, so that would just fall to the chairman. I did have a conversation, me and Todd had a conversation with Ms. Payne, our finance director, and we talked about the water department's budget and their funding, and it would be set up as an enterprise fund, the same as like the transfer station is. So, we discussed bank reconciliations, how water bills go out and how those are paid. I know the water department does. You get paid through a text message. All that will still be set up as a separate account, but that funding will go into their bank account, their general fund bank account. How all those direct deposits go there will shift to our general fund bank account. What else did we
There's a
talk
lot.
about?
So and the reason we're trying to give you the summary now is because there's a lot of information in the package before you that you never saw. We're trying to give you some thoughts on what we've discussed. So when you do take the packet home and you are able to focus on it, you already have heard a brief summary of that. We do feel very confident that this should be a very smooth transaction. We don't think it's quite as complicated as we thought it would be. It may be from the legality side, which we would have counsel to help us with that part. You know, y'all, IDBA has Ms. Wilson now, and man, thank you. You're doing such a great job. We really appreciate it. As I stated the other morning, good job. But anyway, that role stays intact. That role stays run the day-to-day operations from the reporting side. And as far as what our office would have to see, I'm trying to envision this being very similar to a P&Z board, a rec board. That's where the IDBA board stays intact. The IDBA board, IDBA has to stay intact, period, in order to be able, because of the way the legislation set up for funding purposes, which I think we all know that. But that board is now a sounding board for that department. The same as Shelley being the department head versus Rodney being department head. Anything they do goes through the IDBA board. That board / economic development board then says, you know what, we've got a business we're maintaining. It's going to be a mile long water line. At that point, y'all vet it. The IDBA board says, this is what we're going to do. This is the price amount it comes. And just like any other board, it comes before this board for funding. It should be that similar. The only thing that's not that similar is the funding process through the mill rate stuff, the way they can leverage money through bonds or borrow or anything else. But that also can be accomplished in speaking to Ms. Payne. So we know that it's going to take X amount of dollars to fund the IDBA board and economic development board. So I'm just using round math, don't hold me to none of this. But if I said, not meaning if the Board of Commissioners says, you know what, we're still going to let you levy, there'll have to be an intergovernmental agreement as to what you can and can't do, but you have the levying power up to 2 mills. And let's say y'all determine that the IDBA board / economic development board is going to need, say, funding up to a ½ mil. Then the Board of Commissioners would take that other ½ mil that used to be IDA, when you lower that mill rate back in 25, we can't do it in 24. Budget-wise, 25. Then the Board of Commissioners will assume the other half of the mill to be able to pay those debt services off, because that mill still has to come in and pay all those debt services. I think right now we're around $5 million. Am I correct?
$4.5.
$4.5 million that still has to levy somewhere. So we can discuss what percentage of mill needs to stay to operate the IDBA versus what percentage of mill is going to have to pay that debt. We can still base it off that. But we're also probably, once it comes under the Board of Commissioners, not only are you going to have to fund your debt services and your employees' salaries through that, but you're also going to have to be able to fund the water department, where right now, Alan Zemsky, for instance, they get $2 million a year to run a road department. We're going to have to make sure that our mill structure funds that water department. The water department can't sit idle. It's not just a normal operation. And if the IDBA board and the Economic Development Board says that we need to build a line a mile long, then that's going to be for the Board of Commissioners to figure out how to fund that for years to come. Or do we say, okay, you know what, you have levying power, we're going to ask you and us, one or the other, to go on some type of note, which we all know that we inevitably back.
Can I jump in there?
Sure.
They don't have levying authority.
The IDBA has a mill rate levying authority.
They suggested.
So there's.
Well, that's even better, that makes it easier.
Yeah, in Georgia, there are levying authorities and recommending authorities, and IDBA is actually neither one.
Oh, okay.
School board is a recommending authority, board of commissioners is the levying authority. The charter for the IDBA says that the board of commissioners may levy up to 2 mills for their use.
Okay, all right, which makes that a little bit easier then.
Right.
So systematically, for the Board of Commissioners, we all know how our department's head runs. We all know how those department heads operate with the board up under them. They're a recommending body only, which I think the IDBA can still be that recommending body with economic development. Walmart's coming, they're coming right over there, and it's going to take these services to get there. As a recommendation from the IDBA/economic development to the Board of Commissioners, how do you want to fund this project? Here it is, there's your drawings, there's your cost. It's up to us at that point to decide how to get there. So that'd be the daily operations. We already have the trucks, we already service the trucks, we already pay the equipment, we already do the payroll. The only thing we do not do is pay the retirement policy. But it is through ACCG. I have a phone call into Trey Johnson now to try to help me understand the differences in those two and what it's going to look like if the IDBA members come under the BOC's retirement policy. What's to lose or what's to gain? Because we obviously want to keep everybody vested. We want to keep whatever time they have in already acquired. We want to keep that the same, which I've been told that will stay the same either way. It's just the package may change stuff. And at any point, I'm just trying to give you the overviews, but at any point, this conversation is just that. It's an overview. If you'd like to start off with questions from here on out, you're welcome to. I was trying to give you a rough scenario of how we envision this may work. And we may be dead wrong. I'm not saying that we're right. This is my and Christina's ideas. So, now.
Yeah, well, absolutely, thank you. I know we've just been hearing that and then understanding, we request or have the ability to request up to 2 mills, and then I guess here, historically, at least during my time, we've only requested 1 mill. I think that's been pretty constant for the last several years, and just I'm trying to think on what the IDA would have and what that money would go towards as far as how to adjust that, just thinking about for that mill that we have been levying, if therefore is not needed anymore by the IDA to a degree, then I guess from the funding mechanism from the county's perspective, that is still there to support the debt, as you mentioned. One big thing for me is, I know a lot of items to check off, but just timing. I know we operate on a calendar year. And so thinking about the timing of the transition, I feel like it'd be the cleanest, from one year to the next, instead of obviously, or thinking about sometime in the middle of the year, and then understanding that with this past round of budget talks, water and sewer was not in the DOT budget talks, and therefore just us in knowing what we're going to be doing next year, still operating under the current structure, and obviously seeing water and leaning on the BOC, when you talk about funding, there's really not much change to a degree, because as our agreement states currently, any large expenditure, we are to come to you to let you know and request funding or support and other items like that. So just trying to think about the timing from our standpoint of beyond today projects looking in the next year, still having the freedom, so to speak, to pursue those, knowing that at the end of, 24, starting of 25, all of that would then transition to you all. So then just thinking about what's in the pipeline, what's coming up, to know that we have your support to keep operating that and that confidence for the year to come anyway, to make sure that we're setting us up so that way next August or so, when it comes time for mill rate talks, we've already been thinking and preparing what, just doing some math, what 1 mill is for 24, what half a mill or a quarter of a mill. That way we can kind of think about, one of our first, items as an IDA would be to find a director or some sort of, role to fill the economic development person in that, asking to that role, to think about now to almost start planning and advertising so we can find the person and know how much we're going to be working with potentially, so we can kind of get all that set in place. Kind of rambling a little, but just wanted to make sure for the next year to come that we still have you also have the confidence in us to operate the water throughout the transition.
I'll tell you, Ben, I've probably got more confidence in the IDBA now than I've had in 20 years, just so you know up front. I think it's a very stable, very wise decision-making moves. There is an option with that, and we haven't discussed this one. And one is you can continue we want to do a clean cut at year end. We want to start off a new year, whether that be 24 or whether that be 25. 24, if we choose, or if everybody's in agreement that we choose to go 24, we would have to leave the funding mechanisms in place as they stand today, and you technically would currently operate just like you do now throughout the year to get out of that cycle. The only thing we could request at that point, or we could put in an agreement, was before any major purchasers buy this, you run it by the VOC. And really the only thing you're going to be changing is maybe the employees and who they report to, maybe. It could be sort of a soft transition instead of a hard transition, and then let the hard transition be January 1/25, and that's when all the money would flow different direction, but we'll know that in August. And that's just an option. Or we can do nothing until January 1/25 and just have our plan mapped out and say, we're going to do it, but this is the scheduled date. It'll be a hard opening at that point instead of a soft opening. If that makes any sense to anybody. I'm not trying to ramble, but I do think...
Well, some of it's going to have to be soft, because if we're planning on transitioning the IDBA to more economic, like Dee was saying, we're going to have to figure out who those folks are that's going to be there, that's going to take on that sort of a different role in that, you know.
This is actually a good...
So that's what you were talking about. So that, I mean, that sounds good to me as far as sort of transitioning and pulling the whole thing to 25 from just my standpoint. But I mean, you know, we're on that time frame, we can be moving some things over, but, you know, so that in 25 is like two distinct differences.
Well, just to bring up the meeting we had with Anna, the CRC program through, I think it's Archway at the University of Georgia, they're going to come in and we're going to set up a committee to help them draft a economic strategic plan for Madison County. So we'll start that sometime in November, and then putting that program together will run into the spring. So we should have an economic strategic plan in the spring. That will be, I think, really helpful for the IDA board.
The one thing I don't want to get put in people's minds is to think that IDBA is going away, because it's not. It cannot. It must stay in place. If we want to add a / economic development to it, fine, so be it. But IDA must stay intact. IDA board must stay intact. Maybe not. Gene may say, hey, I'm tired, I'm ready to get off. That's fine, but we still have to have that board, because that board still is the board, just like P&Z, that does the homework as a recommending body to the VOC. That's my envision of how that board works.
If I remember the context of what the study committee put together, what I'm reading for them is there's not any concern of the operation of the water department where it is now. Just a recognition of, because that has taken so much energy, and we have almost forsaken the economic development role. So the concept being, if we create that separation, then it gives you greater flexibility, freedom. It changes your focus, so the IDBA board then becomes that entity of what we have going on here that gets to focus on economic development. So a couple of questions I have, and I don't know how much of this, I have some thoughts in my mind, but it really doesn't matter. So have y'all thought about revisiting actually what the role is, or how the IDBA would want to handle that role going forward one of the things that we had discussed, I think we discussed with some of y'all, is there has never been a funds available for the IDBA to purchase property for an industrial park and those kind of things. So, you know, in thinking down the road of what the IDBA's role would be and what it would look like, I think that's one of the things we need to consider. If that is going to be part of the role, then what are the dollars going to need to look like to prepare you to be able to make those kind of investments, to make, whether it be one time and then, you know, maybe 15 years out, maybe another time, whatever, to look at that as a possibility. So, and part of where I'm going with that question is does the IDBA board today, or the structure today, want to handle that question, or do you want to get a director in place and even maybe some input from the Archway Partnership to help define that?
Yeah, I think it would benefit us to be proactive in trying to determine what we think the path forward is, and allowing the CRC program or the Archway program to maybe revise it or guide us from there. I certainly don't want to wait any, I guess, longer on trying to develop that vision, because I just like any day or week that we continue to wait is just another week that we're behind in trying to attract or retain a business, you know. And so the sooner we can kind of figure out a pathway forward, the sooner we can start working on it. And if we can figure out what the vision or the mission or our goals, certain items we want to work on, like land development, like I think that will guide us on who the right person for the director would be versus, you know, if we took a different direction. You know, if we weren't going to be acquiring land and developing land, but more community engagement or relations or business relationships or stuff like that, I think those two people look a little different. And so wanted to make sure that whichever direction we end up going, that we're set up and that person who comes in has the best opportunity to be successful.
To me, that definition of that role was probably, that, in my mind, that's step one.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're looking for.
And hopefully, I mean, that, you know, I sat in on that meeting, and hopefully that with the University of Georgia and the Carl Vinson Institute going to be involved with that, we'll get some, you know, some very good direction on how to do that. You know, and I think we've got good folks on the board now here that can very well manage getting that set up, you know. So, you know, I feel good and comfortable with what we have now as far as doing the transition there and taking, you know, what help we can get and figuring out where we go from there. So.
Would it be safe to say then that the first step needs to be to define and get down on paper a job description for the executive director, then so that collectively we agree that, yeah, this meets our requirement. You know, this is the mindset that we're going to have, whether it includes property management in another industrial park or whether it's going to be devoted specifically to business development, courting potential thing. I mean, because that's a pretty scattergun approach to do that. I mean, for me personally, I like the idea of the IDBA being out there to look for business, and you know, there's been some rumor of a potential of another industrial park in the county being developed by a private developer, and if that were to take place, then I would envision the IDBA's role in directing those folks that, you know, here per our comprehensive development plan, this is the area that we want business to be located. You know, what can we do to assist you to get into a piece of property or whatever, you know, but I'm not sure that, I can't envision the IDBA physically managing selling lots and that type thing. I mean, And if that's the direction we go in, that's fine. I just want to have an understanding before we start down that road that this is what we want to do, you know.
And we're just, approaching it from this moment, all options on the table.
Oh, yeah, I mean, today's the first day of a series of meetings. I was,
I'm gonna come on around the table with that, and I think we'll just end it all around the table, but speaking of visions, so for me, I'm looking at a director as being the role of the Economic Development IDBA Board Director. I'm not looking, and I think Mike would concur in this, the last thing we wanna do is become property owners and property renters and leasers. We're more of, if an individual wants to build a site, or we choose to build a site, the economic director's role is to put somebody in that site, but not to be leasing land, so to speak. I'm leaning more towards the department head runs the water and sewer, and the director runs the economic development and IDBA.
Yeah.
And that's my take on it. Any thoughts? I know Mark's got a bunch of questions. He's gonna fire at us in just a minute. I can see it.
As we think about, creating that new role for the IDBA, one question, when we talk about timing, would leaving the water department as it is until January 1 of 25, would that encumber you, would that slow the process of developing the new vision for the IDBA?
I don't believe so. I mean, at this point, leaving here today, I'd like to have some sort of to-do list, and I think if that is on there, then that's just one of these items to strike through as we move forward now. Luckily, in that regard, that is something that, myself and Gene and Mark as the board, we can bounce off of each other and not really have to get in Rodney's operations in the way of them. So they can continue operations, we can continue discussing projects and leading that charge, and then collectively on our extra time that we all have, right, to explore that.
Yeah. Well, I know that everybody, communication is key here during that, and so I think everybody that's on your board here, all of y'all will communicate with the BOC, with Todd and the staff on that about what needs to go on, in that transition period. As long as we all know what the end goal is to be at, I think that that's something that can be worked at. I don't know that is an issue, and I'd love to hear what Gene and Mark have to think about what's been proposed out there.
Well, before we do that, Frank, you got anything? What's in your mind of how you're envisioning this to be, and
For the executive director role?
for all of it, if you like?
Well, I was just thinking, if we're not, I know we have some land that we need to do something with, but if we're not gonna get in the business of buying land and setting it up, would the director be somebody to recruit and court potential business to come in and then set them up with current landowners? Like looking at our, our comprehensive plan or future land use plan, when we get that together, and say, all right, so our plan says we want to put this type of, industry or commercial business or whatever in this land or in this area of the county, find out who owns the land, see, if they're willing to sell, something like that, and try to get them together with, would that be
It could be a potential there, because it's happened in the past, and potentially currently. The good part about having the economic developer do that, or director do that, is they're gonna come back to the IDBA board and say, guys, I found so-and-so, and they're wanting to come. Where do we got water? What is it gonna take to get them water? Can we get some cost estimates together before we make any kind of commitment? Is the area right for it? Because that's that board's job.
And are the current landowners, are they willing to sell? Do they have any?
Correct, and they may not, but that would be for the IDBA board. But I agree, I think you're right on target with your mindset there. But that's why that IDBA board has to be at the middleman. That's the meat and bones of the economic development director. as the IDBA.
May I just offer that?
Sure.
And we may not be at this point in economic development, but typically one of the primary function reasons for having an industrial or economic development authority is that they can acquire land and assist with bond financings and tax abatements and things that are incentives to business, whether it's an industrial park or a piece-by-piece acquisition. So, again, we may not be at the point we're looking at industries of that size, but at some point, that is a typical role of an industrial authority.
And I just think about strategic parts of the county or pieces of things that if they do come available, that group or that director being in a position to try to secure it for future industrial growth. Or, but the James Holcomb piece, I think is a good example of that. We have it, it's 30 acres, it's on the railway. That's lots of things you could do there. But if it came for stuff from a private owner and we never pursued it, then that's just an opportunity that we missed out on. So someone to utilize the comprehensive plan, see where we initiated or focusing our future growth at, and just stay aware and monitor those areas. And then if something's available, they can pursue it. If not, then that's
Right.
the decision of that board and this board to decide what direction they want to pursue and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know that an economic developer would have the power to physically do a tax abatement. So and that could all be how we word that in the role.
Well, I mean, that's too complicated to go into here, but the fact you've got a constitutional authority here makes that a possibility. Having a party to it.
And when I was talking about it, I was thinking that the vision is that we might want to do that in the future. Probably, we're not ready for it right now, definitely. But, in the future, like Dennis has talked about up there on the other end of the county, where there's been potential talking of things going on, that might be something that we want to do something ourselves if it were to be available, especially out in the, like you're talking about on the railroad, out in the Hull area and things like that. I mean, that might be potential for the future. I want to make sure that who the person is understands, enough about economic development and going after the proper industries or commercial businesses and those kind of things that, that we're looking into all the avenues that we can to try to bring in the right people, whatever it takes to do that, within the reason that we look at it. I mean, if we need to acquire some property with it, if it's one of those things that we see that potentially and we feel pretty good that it's going to happen, then maybe that's what we ought to do.
Well, so what I'll do is I will work on kind of what our short-term economic development plan may be, what, 5 or 10 year kind of idea, and then let that kind of guide the description and try to work for a job description that encompasses our immediate needs, but also our short-term and long-term as far as what we hope to get out of this role, seeing as we haven't had someone or a board with that sole focus in our county for quite some time. If that's an okay direction to go, then I'll work on that.
I believe that would be very prudent. I think that would be a prudent first step for us to take. Another thing that I think that as this evolves, to me, one of the first steps needs to be, and I will use SMI as an example here, perhaps we, through the Chamber of Commerce resources now, we could explore existing businesses that want to expand here in the county as the first step. If we, as a group, the IDBA and the commissioners decide that we do want to do something in another location, because we've about maxed out the Matico part. The obvious places either, I mean, there's two places that we have potential at. One's down there at Holcomb property, and the other's on Highway 98, with the Highway 98 area recognizing that there's going to be fallout from Jackson County up there. Plus, there's probably a thing that, and I'm sure the executive director, when we land on that, will be someone much more knowledgeable than I am about this, but they'll look for where potential labor's at also, which is a huge factor. And here again, I reference SMI. The only thing holding them up right now is finding more employees, you know, and I guess the other side of it seems to be the consensus of this group, or what I'm thinking of is, you know, you got to spend money to make money, and we need to be all on board with that. You know, there's no need of putting somebody out there that, you know, can hit home runs and then we'll play pickleball.
Yeah, well, with the potential for the tax, that 2%, I mean, there's opportunity there for the IDBA to have money to invest in those kind of things, which we really haven't had before, so that's.
Commissioner Oster, any thoughts?
So,
I know it's a lot to think about.
you know, the IDBA, you know, and I think it's just saying, you know, I'll say it's kind of drowning in minutia trying to run the utility department. And it was part of that was, you know, even when I was over there, we just didn't have the funds to do something else, and we you know, we deal with the job that was in front of us. And I think this is an opportunity, at least I assume this is an opportunity that we could take it and create kind of what the original vision was. And having somebody in that spot that can, with the wherewithal to strategically think, you know, vision that process out, know how to court the right industry, but also weed out the wrong industry based on what we have to offer, and then also guide, whether it's other local businesses together or this board, on where to, that we need to invest. You know, we often say we need more water, we need more sewer, but how do we do that, and how can that come to fruition with getting us, you know, in front of some stuff instead of, you know, behind and chasing. I know that's a big ask, and that's a lot of skill sets to have within one person. But if that person doesn't have it, they have the wherewithal to know who they need to consult with. You know, for example, whether we buy a property or not, you know, there's management people out there that can help you do that, development people that can help do that. So just trying to understand that, you know, the team that we need to put together there, and there's probably been several people in this room in the past, and I've been part of it, is, you know, it's a lot easier to court these companies when I say individually, it's the person in that role, because you're signing NDAs, you're having closed door conversations, you know, it's some of it is somewhat secretive because you're working on Operation, you know, Sunshine or whatever they call it, to try to put all those pieces together individually, because a lot of the companies, you know, even small companies, you know, they don't want bad press, they don't want nothing to go, and they want to make sure all the ducks are in a row before there's an announcement in the paper. So, you know, the skill set to pull all that out on where we lack stuff, you know, whether it's water, sewer in certain locations, whether it's broadband, or whether it's internet in certain locations, we got to have somebody that can really know how to, when I say manipulate, know how to talk to the right people and get those people in the room to bring that to bear.
And then, again, it'll be up to us to fund that. Now, that, the mechanism of how we fund it, 1, 2, contractually and all that kind of stuff, I still have different questions about that, but to me, that's not here and there today. I don't see it. I see us getting our ducks in a row, and then we move through this transition over the next, 12 months. So there may be a clean slate. If you cut it off at, 125, but, to make this move, to make any move in the next couple of months, I have some serious reservations about how this works. Some of it's financially and some of it's just giving y'all an opportunity to really meet and talk about what this may look like, and then the interaction between it.
Thank you. Good job.
Mr. Chairman, may I just offer one suggestion?
Yes.
There are at least 3 counties that have structure similar to this around us. I know from talking to people in business. Oconee County, Barrett County, and Athens Clarke County, where they have in-house water and sewer departments and then economic development or industrial development authorities. Another big player in the economic development side is your Chamber of Commerce.
Correct.
And so all of those, I think, have different structures as to, for example, how the chamber interacts with the authority, whether the authority even has a full-time director or whether that's a role that's maybe supplied by the chamber or the county or somehow in conjunction. And I'm not the expert, but again, I just suggest we don't try to reinvent wheels.
I know there's a lot of ways
Yeah.
to.
And me and Ben has talked about that, and we've had conversations about it. You're spot on. What I'd like to do now is go to the IDBA board and let those guys ask us questions, because I know Mark's got some, I know Gene's got some. Ben's done a great job so far. Mike, in closing out the meeting today, I'd like for you to give us some bullet points off the top of your head, not officially right now. If you need to go back and put an email together and send it out to everybody, that's fine too, of some hurdles that we need to accomplish moving forward. The thing about 12 months is 12 months don't take long. That's just 12 meetings away. It may sound like 12 months, but it's just 12 meetings. It'll come on as fast. This board, the VOC board, has been very productive over the past 3.5 years, or 2.5 years, because we never really take the foot off the gas. And we said we were going to do a comp plan. We followed through. And I think we have to set ourselves a time frame that's realistic, but we don't need a 4-month lull, because we get ourselves in that sometimes, and then we have to speed along to catch back up. But Mark, please give us your thoughts.
Go first, she's got her list.
Oh, you gonna fill in the blanks.
Well, mine are more comments rather than questions. I think that just based on the discussion we've had so far, that we should all be able to recognize that it's going to be much easier for us to hire somebody to direct the IDBA, the economic development of Madison County, without having them to run a water department, to run water, to source water from a surrounding county. If their focus is on economic development, whether that means they are in charge of purchasing, facilitating the purchase, whatever that looks like, those people who have those skills, they can handle that and manage it. And I think working with the chamber, Mike's comments are spot on. Yes, we don't need to reinvent what's out there. We need to study what's there and what works best in Madison County, and it might be a blend of something, but we just don't have to scratch everything and start our own economic development department. I applaud Ben. He has stepped in and immersed himself in what we need to do, and I'm in favor of us moving forward with a job description, specific what does it look like? We have the study committee, I serve on the study committee, we have this template. So let's really define what it is with the comp plan that we want Madison County's economic development to be. And we have a vacant seat here that needs to be filled. And we have an empty director's position. But separating the water from that person's responsibility, I think is the biggest plus that will help in this board.
Thank you. It's gonna be hard to fill that one, because she's pretty good there, Mark.
How's our comprehensive study on the water system coming out?
We're probably 10 months out, because it was 12 months before we would know anything. That started about 2 months ago.
All right.
That's gonna be a guiding tool.
That will be a big plus, I think, in heading forward. I think that the county needs to be prepared to hire a utilities director. Now, Rodney can do either one, but he can't do both. He can't fix the leaks during the day and look to the future at night. You know, you gotta have to have somebody do both of those things. And that's not a one person job, really. You know, somebody's got to be looking at the plan and the long term and all those things. And I don't want to offend anybody, but adding more politics to anything is probably a hard road. You know, it just.
Yeah, you're right.
But you know, what I want is what's best for Madison County, and doesn't really matter who runs the water department. But it's going to have enough help to run the water department, not let it run them. So you need to be prepared for somebody looking out for the future and somebody fixing the leaks and keeping the system running. But he's not going to be able to negotiate contracts with our partner counties that we buy water from or sell water to, or figure out how we're going to meet the needs of the future. Right now, we're only producing 35–40% at best of the water that we sell, and we're selling surplus from other counties, and it is shrinking every day.
Mm-hmm.
Their surplus is going down, and our demand is going up, and whoever's managing that is going to have to be on top of where you're going to get it from. And that's a pretty good project. We just drilled a well in over at James Hawthorne. We got water. We didn't get as much work as we'd like to have. We may do some more, you know, but it's you don't know what you're going to get. If a person could tell you what was down there, he'd be full time. But on the water, you know, you just need to be. I think that's our sources of water is going to be critical, and it's coming fast. Everybody, all our vendors that we buy water from, they love selling us water because they have excess capacity today, but that is shrinking steadily, and so they'd all rather sell it retail than wholesale.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they like to sell it wholesale if they don't have a retail customer for it, but they would rather sell it as a retail rate, which is about twice as much as the wholesale rate. And so that's going to be a big concern for the county and for whoever's running the water department. On the economic development side, whether you own real estate or not, most of the people that are looking to build or do something take the path of least resistance. That's just human nature. And you know that if you have somebody come to your office and say, we'd like to do this, where can we do it? You don't have anything to offer other than check with this person, or this person, or this person. And of course, when somebody of high value shows up, the price goes up. And that's just how it is. So I'm not of winning property, but I think we may need to invest in some places that line up with our comprehensive plan. If this is gonna be railroad industry, then maybe we do need to own some land on the railroad. But that does not need to sell to the first person that comes along, because there's not that much of it. If you look at the map, the parcel map, you know, there's just limited number of places of large tracts or tracts that you could put together that are available, and maybe some of that you need to have invested in to where that's available. But you know, your people that you want to come here are either going to be high value to where they pay property tax, or they're going to have a lot of retail potential where they pay sales tax. I'm not taking anything away from any business that we have, but people that want to build a 10,000 square foot Butler building for a warehouse, you can't spend a lot of money to serve that, right, because it's not going to return a lot of money. So it's, we're talking about splitting a meal, which would be right now around $500,000 if you half the meal. You've got $18 million in debt to service. I don't know that that's going to do that, right, and I don't know that it's going to allow you to purchase any real estate that would be attractive to who you want to come. Right. So don't cut the pie too thin.
Yeah, I want you to know, I was just hypothetically throwing numbers.
Well, I understand that, but I'm telling the truth.
You're the rubber meets the road guy, okay.
So that, you know, that's my take. And when I came to the IDA, I was a water sewer person, not a industrial development. But I have studied a little bit since then, you know, to see what makes the cat register ring. And but I'm sure there's other people that are better qualified than I am to do industrial development. And Rodney's got my number, whether I'm on the IDA board or not. And so it doesn't really matter with me. I'm more in support of bringing things into Madison County that will take some burden off the property owner. We all know that assessments are up about 60% in the last 2 years in general. So we need some things that generate revenue. Our needs for everything continues to increase. And so we might need to do some things to make it easier for people that would have a high return to come to Madison County. And if that includes having some land in inventory, that might be a good move. But that's not all I got for the moment.
I mean, like you're saying, it's better to have somebody that's coming in that's not just paying property tax, but is bringing in sales tax.
Well, if they work $250 million like GRP, then it's all right if they don't pay any sales tax.
Right.
Yeah. But if they're something smaller or something that's not of that high value, if you go to any of the counties around us that have a Walmart or a Kroger or Ingles, you can look at the, value on it, and you can determine if you're gonna want them based on their property tax value or their sales tax value.
That's right.
And, you know, a Walmart that sells $1 million a week pays $40,000 a week in sales tax. Now, they're only valued at 10, 12, $15 million. They don't pay a whole lot of sales tax. You know, the Kroger shopping center out here, on Q Public, they belong to the Clark County Industrial Authority. But they pay a lot of sales tax. And,
The one thing I want to add on the 10,000 square footers, and or even a little bit bigger, depending on the size of the garden. Again, it depends on what occupies that shell. Because there's an inventory tax. If, for instance, they have $5 million worth of stuff stored in that building, come December 31st, they're paying tax on that inventory.
Oh, I think did we pass a Freeport some years ago?
I think we did.
Yeah, but Freeport,
Yeah, it's not
if
totally.
it's for Amazon,
Yeah.
if it's an Amazon warehouse, they're paying tax on that.
That's right, it's just a partial exemption.
Yeah, because I know myself and hardware stores around, we pay an inventory tax December 31st, of whatever's in the building. But yes, you're right, Mark, 100%. And always, I thank you for your opinions, because it does help us. You know, we've got an hour into this now. About 10 or 15 more minutes is all I'm going to request of you for now, because this is just a prelim meeting. I think it's very beneficial. I hope Hannah back there in the newspaper writes down something that says this, BOC and IDBA merge for a sit down with the water department, but it needs to be known that we can do this and we can achieve our goals without fighting and arguing. So, thank you. Mike, give us some bullet points on some of the things you see that we may need to be looking at behind the scenes as a BOC and IDBA.
All right, so.
I know the way the charter reads you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm more just thinking through details. So we've got to transfer assets. So hopefully somebody has, there's an asset list somewhere of IDBA assets, titled assets, deeded assets, real estate, and leases. And then we may just have to do a general bill of sale for the non-titled assets. Of course, there's debts associated with those assets. The bonds, that's actually structured, if I understand it correctly, that's kind of the way it would work on future projects as well. The IDBA will continue to be the issuer of bonds, and they will be revenue bonds because they'll be funded by a contract with the Board of Commissioners, with the county contracts to make the payments. That's what we have now. So whatever we do can't impede that. But I talked to our bond lawyer. He said that's not a problem to get around. You talked about employee benefits. So when you're bringing employees over, we've got to place them on salary scale. We've got to look at benefits. Got to make sure we don't try not to subject people to waiting periods and that sort of thing. And a lot of what I hear you talking about, I think sort of boils down to coming up with an org chart with job descriptions for each person on it, both on the county side and on the authority side. And we don't know what that looks like yet. And I'm not the expert, but I'm thinking about the presentation we saw last night from Mark Perry and his fellow chiefs. They went on some pretty intense fact-finding sessions, and they came up with a really good plan presentation that made a lot of sense. And I think if we put together some people to do something similar, maybe we come to the same spot. And in that, I would throw in talking as well as just talking to people in those counties, talking to DCA, and specifically Rusty Haygood, who's an assistant director at DCA now. Rusty was the economic development department head of Oklahoma County before he went up to DCA. So he's, I've talked to him over the years. He's a great resource, and he's ideas there. You know, you may want to look at some point, getting some advice, some paid advice from one of the engineering firms that specialize. I mean, a lot, and Derek would know more about this than I do, but a lot of the big engineering firms, local government consulting is a big part of their business now. And so you can hire them on a, you know, a defined piece basis to come in and help you with that, I think, come up with some of these ideas. And the last thing I'd say is, to a point Mark made, you know, where you put water and sewer and how much you invest in doing that is going to, as I said before, it's going to drive where your development goes, not just your commercial industrial, but your residential as well. You know, there are various ways of planning. I'm not a land planner either, but one of the land planning tools is to, where you want residences to be, put water and sewer there, and give the developers small lot sizes. They would much rather develop small lots than big lots, but they need water and sewer to do that. And that requires some upfront investment from the county.
Before we close, I want to thank all y'all for coming. This really curbs a lot of emails and a lot of, not just in conversations, I guess you could say. Not really sidebar, but it means a lot to me because this is a driving force that I think this Board of Commissioners is wanting to do. In a way, I look at not having economic development 20 years ago when it was needed. May not be a bad thing because we've let everybody else figure out the good and the bad. Maybe we can learn from them. I think we have some people we can learn from that would guide us. Being that I can't say enough about what you've done, Stephanie, and what you've done and the input that Gene and Mark gives us is always valued. Thank you.
Well, before we leave, one of the things too on our fact-finding efforts, you know, part of the study committee talked about, you know, setting the department up as an enterprise fund. And, you know, enterprise fund should pay for itself. We know water and sewer takes a very long time to get to the point where they pay for themselves. I say that to say, you know, with the debt that we have, making sure that we can fund that, you know, the current bond payments we have and the way we have things set up, what that financial picture may look like. Just that, you know, there's a status quo payment, if you would, to kind of, you know, what percentage of the mill it takes to pay debt that's already accumulated, and then somewhere while we're getting some help and some advice and those kind of things, and it very well can be from a planning engineering firm, that, you know, what that next 5-10 year picture may look like. Because we can't start today just paying what we owe. We'll never get ahead. And so we got to know somehow to forecast a little bit. I mean, I'm not saying it'll be perfect, but somehow we've got to forecast that investment to get started. And so that's part of that picture too.
Thank you, sir. Christina, just for the record, so 18 million?
That's what I added up, about 18.8.
Okay. Well, we got the numbers missing somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't have those numbers.
I don't know if there's a motion.
Yeah. So,
What is this list right here?
What is that, please?
Yeah.
Let me see. No, this list is 4 million, what we have. There's 2 on here that have been paid off, that the county paid for us last year.
it wouldn't have been that much though.
No, there's zeros on here. The only thing that's.
We'll
There's 2
figure it
that
out.
are 500,000 and then 1 that's 2.
That's, it's the one the commissioners have for the Seagrass Mills target, that's the GIFA loans that the IDBA has. So they're right at $4.5 million. There's 3 loans that are still open.
Yeah.
we'll kick it around and figure it out. Moving on to item number 5, discuss the Seagraves Mill Dam project. This was sent to us by Ryan Kinsey. It was basically 2 options, and I think that's what we had requested, give us 2 options of cost. And he has done that, or Carter Engineering has done that. I think we asked for some rough numbers, and I don't know if these are rough numbers or do the job numbers, to be honest with you. With that being said,
First, can we get a definition of what we think the best solution is?
yeah,
Based on the engineer's information, what y'all's thoughts on what you feel like the solution is to solar Seagraves Mill subject?
hard question, Mr. Chairman.
It's a category 1 dam. That doesn't have anything to do with the IDBA.
Right.
And,
But now, where it is now, we're underneath that.
yes, the water level is, yes. So that's a temporary fix. There's something that's got to be done to get the state environmental satisfied that it's no longer a category 1 dam.
So if it becomes a category 1, if we go over 25 feet or 100 acres, or 100 acres.
Is the option 1 lowering the crest, that's to get it out of the category 1 classification, right?
That's right. Yeah, and we're already there.
Well, the dam is drained.
Right.
But if you had a big rain and it washed the log in the drain, the dam could still fill up.
Okay, so it's still capable of being.
So, in order for it to be out of the category 1, it's either got to be less than that 25 feet or less than 100 acre feet.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the option of lowering the dam would take that lake down to about 8 acres. It would use the existing spillway, would have to be blasted down to a level, but they have determined that spillway is solid rock. So that saves you from having to pour the bottom of the spillway.
Right.
But you would, I think, have to put some head walls on it and channel that, but it would be at a point where the lake would be up, the surface area would be around 8 acres. So it would, I'm not exactly sure what it is at full pool right now, but that would bring it down to that and shrink it in. It's over 200 acre feet right now, and it would have to come to under 100. You can do that by lowering the top of the dam about 7 feet, I believe, and doing some improvements to where the spillway couldn't wash out. You put a head wall, but you'd use the natural bottom of the spillway to do that. And this is explained to us by Brian, and I'm going off the cuff, so, but that's the gist of it. The other thing is, the other method of remedying that is to cut the knots that has to be so many feet wider, you know, at a pit, like the one on the bypass out there where Athens, Clark County has a reservoir. But the base of it has to be so wide and the slope of it has to be at a particular angle. And so that it's not possible for it to stop up. You know, the estimate between those two is not a tremendous amount of difference. But the size of the pool, if you save it, is considerably less. Now, the dam can be repaired or brought up to current standards, but it will still be a Category 1 dam. And if it failed, it would, because it belongs to the county, we would be the liability holders of that failure, is my understanding.
So part of the consideration here was that, I think, I'm just trying to recap for the Board of Commissioners, we talked a lot more about it at the Industrial Authority meetings, that, if we could save some portion of the lake but get it below category 1, perhaps the landowners around there would be willing to accept that property back that is the dam property now, so that the IDA, North County, would no longer own that. So that's still part of the target, right?
That would be part of the target, is to not have ownership of the dam at all.
Yeah.
And, Derek, in your time, did you hear any, have we done any research on what the base flow of that stream is? How much water it would give?
I don't have any numbers also on the but I just remember it was low. I mean,
Insufficient.
It is not enough to be useful.
Right. That was what I had been told, but I didn't have any hard number on what that base flow was.
Yes, because most of the reservoir type flow matrices that they use, you know, the baseline is what they call 7Q10, which is a 7-day average on a 10-year daily basis to identify kind of what would have to be left in there to be sustainable downstream. And then that's where, you know, you can't take any of that out,
Right.
but then you can start taking some of the top out. And from my recollection, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So the end result for the Board of Commissioners is you have two options. Truly, one of the two here. Don't recognize these numbers other than nothing more than a guideline, because we would actually have to go out for an RFP on this for everybody. But just to give you a mind frame of what the dollar figures you are looking at over $200,000. At that cost, Board of Commissioners will need to decide which avenue, how much water you want to leave in the dam. One, you want to leave it empty. One, do you want to leave it at 8 acres? If I recall right, the email that I saw was that lake at full pool was about a 500-acre lake. Because I thought it was a 200-acre lake. We were talking about potentially dividing it as an option, and they said, oh, no, it's not 200, it's like 500. So there's a lot more water in it.
I think it was more in the 200 acre feet. It's not 200 surface acres.
Yeah.
It's the surface and, you know, the depth. You know, we did a study of the topography of the bottom to determine how deep it was, but it still came up over 200 acre feet. And, it, you know, the likelihood of being able to divide it into two lakes was not a good option.
Yeah.
And it had to come down under 100. Frank had, you know, worked some in the legislature to try to get that raised to 150, and but that was not. And I think it had already been raised from 75 to 100 or something, so they were reluctant to entertain any interest in raising that again.
So my question is the only two options faced, and the reason I say for the Board of Commissioners is because I think at one time we had talked about using potential funds to do whatever we could to try to save the lake. But it looks like there is really no option to save the lake. We can save the pond, but we can't save the lake. I'm sorry?
I think economically those two are the best.
Yeah. But we're still, at the best case scenario, is going to be at 8 acres. Right?
I think that's fair, because we need to get the engineers to do that.
But 8 or 10 acres is nothing.
But the caveat to that is that the county relinquishes ownership of the dam.
That's correct.
So if that's not in place, then there won't be a lake.
That's correct.
Well, and if we can't, you know, if the landowners want to take it back, we're going to continue to, or the IDBA under this deed is going to continue to own this 0.211 acres.
Yeah, I'm still.
Narrow and long?
Oh, actually, it's .211 and 2.686. So there's about 3 acres out there that the IDBA owns that I don't have a copy of, so I didn't have to plat.
They go with the water department.
Wait a minute.
This is not really a usable piece of land right here.
I love you, Mark.
Problem solved. Parcel A is the land itself, parcel B is, I guess, the spillway behind it. So, I mean, we could continue, counties own odd strips that they can't do anything with, and this might end up being one of them, I guess, but it would be nice to get rid of it if we could.
But inevitably, so all the chatter for past 6 years, and before it gets to Facebook in any means possible, there's nothing the Board of Commissioners can do to put that back to a full lake. There's nothing. Every effort has been exhausted. Now we're to a point of what do we want to spend to retain an 8 acre?
You can put it back to full food.
We just.
It'll be a category one day.
You do what?
It'll be a repaired, refurbished category one dam, but it'll still be a category one dam. There's a lot of category one dams, but you're maintaining that liability for no benefit to the greater Madison County. It's just to the.
And it is a landlocked lake that we do not have rights to the lake, other than the dam. Privately held all the way around, is what I mean.
I assume there's an easement over here somewhere. But probably not, but
It's state
point
water.
the same.
It's state water.
It leaves that property, so it's, if you can paddle up the spillway, you can paddle out the way.
Clean out the spillway.
Yeah, actually it goes to the right of way of Seagraves Mill, so you've got, you got almost 300 feet of frontage on Seagraves Mill behind them.
On the road.
On the road. Mm-hmm.
That's just gonna take you to the base of the dam. I mean, all they did was deed to guarantee that the county owns the dam.
I'm trying to come up with the best terminology for Dennis, because Dennis is the one that's gonna catch those phone calls. And I'm trying to say, okay, what does Dennis need to be explained to them? Option 1, option 2, or potentially an option 3 that we don't even have a figure for if we put it back and it's still a category 1.
What's the date on that deed there?
It is 2009, February 4th, 2009.
They kept the lake 10 years longer than they could have, and what repairs have been done to it has not been at their expense. But it's not a good fit for the county. And that might not be the answer you like, but
That property looked like that through there, looks absent, so that they.
like swamp.
Big old valley.
What some of the conversation that I've had with the folks is, number one, the question is, did the IDBA actually have authority to run that lake? Because they own the dam, but they didn't own the lake. Okay. The lake's not a hazard. That's exactly right. The water was immaterial, the dam was the problem. And the other question is, and I'd say this, but we're talking about the 8 acre lake where that lake at one time was somewhere between 70 and 80 acres. The other side of that question that I've been approached with was, what are you gonna do about the diminished property value? You know, we bought lakefront property, y'all took it away from me, what are you gonna give me? And I don't have an answer to either one of those, but I'm pretty sure that I'd be upset if you told me, all right, you had a 75 acre lake, and I'm gonna give you an 8 acre lake back,
and your lake frontage now is still gonna be 800 foot from your property. I'm not sure I'd be thrilled with that at all. I can give you what I think, I haven't researched it, but I can give you what I think is the legal answer. If I would
Please
make
do.
any of your constituents happy.
Please do.
I cannot, if I buy property on a lake, but I don't have a covenant or, any legal mechanism of forcing you as the dam owner to maintain that dam for my benefit, I have no rights. I cannot, sort of like, sounds like the same sort of theory we hear every time we have a zoning hearing. You cannot force your neighbor to keep a park for your benefit, or to maintain a dam for your benefit.
So actually, in the event that we reduce that, full pool, those property owners around there actually own more property. We just own down to the low water mark, which has
Right.
changed considerably.
Correct.
So what we give them is a lot of land.
Correct, and we would be happy to give them, we would not make them buy that 3 acres from us. We would be happy to give it to them, and it would not be a gratuity, in my legal opinion, because the liability we're getting rid of is more than whatever the value of the land has. But we could give them that if they want the dam, and they can do what they want with it.
Or they can buy the thing and put the lake, then they're responsible for it, right?
Well, I'm saying they don't have to buy anything
Well,
from us.
no, but I mean, they could.
But then at that point, they're going to get the letters from the EPD that we've been getting.
Yeah.
And they can deal with that as they see
Could
fit.
be.
But they can't force us to do that
That's
for
what
their
I'm saying.
benefit.
So, yeah.
I wanted to be clear for the record, though, we met with the homeowners, or we met with some property owners out there. We met with them in a meeting, and the promise was given that we would do our very best to do like what they felt like was an untruthful, whether it was or whether it wasn't, didn't matter, that we would do our due diligence to come up with the best option possible within reason to protect the lake. We done that. This is the only option left on the table, 1, 2, or 3. And unfortunately, I'm gonna agree with Mike. If I owned property on Lake Hartwell, I'd be mad most of the time, because when it's down, the lake moved away from my $200,000 dock house, but I don't own one, but the water does go down, and I don't hear them.
There's nothing you can do about that. And if the Corps of Engineers decides they don't want to maintain that lake anymore, there's nothing you can do about that.
Unfortunately, I know that lake's been there since 1860 something, and it's unfortunate, but it's not unfortunate based off of this BOC nor IDA that this is the consequences we stand with.
Yeah.
It's not. I honestly give this an effort. This is why we have this. This is why the IDA give an effort to have this. There's not much we can do at this point to appease anybody. It's a bad situation.
I would just remind you, it doesn't leave the landowners in any different situation than they were in before Ms. Seagraves deeded that dam to the IDBA. At that point, I guess Ms. Seagraves owned it, and she could have maintained it or drained it or turned it into an 8-acre lake or anything she wanted to, and there was nothing those landowners could do about that either.
Well, thank you for that, sir. So, at this point, we don't have to do it during a special call meeting, we can put it back on here if we choose to, but we need some kind of resolve as to what the next step is. Because we've got to get this behind us. We do not need this lingering no further.
Well, currently, the way it stands is y'all's decision to make anyway, right?
Yeah. We work for y'all.
It's 2 for 2. It's 2 for 2.
Don't find it, please.
Well, I'll tell you what,
The county's the one on the hook.
Yeah.
Well, we're us, but what I was referring to is the title of property in question here is titled to that.
We can give it to you, we'll sign it.
but I still, either way, I
Get your
still
attorney,
can't
talk
leave.
to our attorney, yeah. We'll work it out.
Either way, the Board of Commissioners still cannot leave the dam height at 25 feet. We still have to lower the dam if we don't do nothing.
Yeah,
It's lower the spillway.
ever how much liability you wanna have.
That's right. And Dan won't tell you
Down,
none.
nothing, or political disaster, however you wanna make it. But, the county should have never got into lake business, is what it boils down to.
Sir, I'll be honest with you, I don't do this for political reasons.
I understand that.
I know, and I'm not arguing with you. What I'm saying is we inherited this mess, but I need it behind us. And if it takes Todd to say that we're not gonna move forward with it, I'll be the first one to say we're not gonna move forward with it. I'll take the heat from the public. It's what I meant, sir.
Yeah, I understand that, and it's,
I think it would be less heat if there was really a full history written on what transpired, some of the points that Mike's made about the ownership of the dam, had it never moved from her to us, the property owners would be in the same position they are. If that was really driven home in some publication.
That's a good idea.
Then there, maybe Dennis would get fewer phone calls. I don't know.
I hate to think that my commissioner and my dear friend, Commissioner Adams, is gonna catch heat over something that I'm almost recalling that this was a legislative move that would put us out of compliance to begin with. Once we owned it, when it was out of compliance, then we inherited an out of compliance dam to try to fix it. Because the property owner said they couldn't do it. They couldn't afford it. And the county says, hey, we'll do it for you until they found out the cost of it. And they decided not to do it. Am I correct?
Well, the only reason, and Mark, you remember this better than I do, but as I understand it, the thought was that somehow we put a water treatment facility there, and that would be a source of drinking water, which, from what I had been told, was never realistic, and I'm not sure why somebody thought that was a good idea. But that's why the IDBA was willing to take title. It turned out that was never feasible. So, again, the homeowners aren't in any different place.
Our due diligence was not done.
Yeah, right.
I will follow recommendations of, but I don't get a vote anyway, but I will follow recommendations of the gentleman that represents that area. But I have a hard time, and I would not personally recommend to the board that we spend people in Carlton bringing on the dam in Sanford. I just don't see it. We tried, but it's not feasible. And if that goes
We
against.
gotta spend some, we gotta spend something.
We gotta spend something anyway.
Do nothing.
Yeah, well, no, we gotta spend something just to get it into compliance, period.
That's what I'm saying. So
But I'm talking about, I don't wanna make any promises that we're gonna put it back full.
no, we still have liability. We're not trying to do that.
Are we agreeing that, Christina needs to go out for an RFP, or we need to write an RFP, one or the other, to move forward with whichever option is gonna be the cheapest, because the end result's gonna be 8 acres before we're done.
0 acres or 8 acres.
Yeah.
0 acres or 8 acres.
Zero is your cheapest.
Zero is what I'm, yeah, I mean, if you look at it.
Okay.
Because that's not any worse condition than they were before, right? So then it removes liability. It gives them land, right?
If you went with the 8 acre option, and that dam was the reason that water was impounded, and somebody drowned, not on your property, but in the lake that you created, and that's a liability.
I don't know about that. Honestly, I'm not sure it is, but the liability we've been focused on this whole time is downstream. That's right.
That's right. But
Which is complicated, because it's
if
Madison
you're wanting to
County.
get zero liability, it's a big thing.
Yeah.
And,
For one, I'm not gonna jeopardize the lives, or will support jeopardizing the lives downstream.
Look, I think the point Mark was making, the only reason you would leave any water in that hole at all is if the landowners will take title to the dam back.
Correct.
But if they're not, then there's no reason to have any, there's only disadvantages to having water there.
Okay. We still gotta spend money on one way or the other, so. Do an RFP. We don't need a vote to prepare an RFP, we'll have to have a vote after.
It sounds like we need to reach out to the property owners to see what
That's
they're
what
willing
I'm
to
gonna
do.
suggest, Dennis have a meeting with them and lay the options out there. Here's where we are.
You don't like it, hey.
Like a motion, we adjourn, right?
Maybe you wanna get that RFP so that you have an accurate cost of the two options.
Okay.
And before you meet with the public, you know, if you tell them it's X number of dollars and it comes back twice that much, it's not something you wanna talk about forever, because
That's right.
it's always painful.
Yeah.
And so maybe you need to be well prepared when you do that.
So you put out an RFP asking for a price for both options?
Both options.
From each offer, or?
I think any, grader that would give you both options, and then, you could at least have an accurate thing to say, hey, this is the two options we have, but, at one point it was discussed that if they wanted the 8 acres, they would pay the difference between Plan A and Plan B. So the county's liability is to get rid of it at the least expense. It might be that the county's gonna pay either way, but you're gonna take it back. But, that's up to.
I'll tell you what our insurance guy, Dan Horn, is gonna say, you gotta drain it, because you cannot afford the liability of it. That's what Dan Horn's gonna say.
But if in that,
Yes,
they're gonna take it back,
sure.
then
Gotcha.
you're out of the ownership of it.
Yes, sir.
And,
All right.
and they're happy, or than they would be with the knots, and you still get the end result of no liability.
But the RFP in hand will tell you what is the price difference and whether or not that's even gonna be an option
That's right.
for them to have any size.
Yes. Statements or remarks for anybody in the room? Citizens?
Hearing none, move to adjourn.
There you go.
We'll take all calls, but like you say, you're right. That's what you cleared it up in my mind.
I got we don't need to talk about this.
Yeah, I'll look at that. Wow.
That's all it is, Larry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna try and